let's discuss the kickout clause. The kickout clause you will use when a buyer has to sell a property before they can actually make the purchase of the home. However, they want to get under contract to do that. This would You add this to your regular FAR bar contract and make sure on the FAR bar to check off that box on the last page that would include this contract on as part of the major contract. So if you read through, it says if initialed by all parties, the clauses below will be incorporated into the Florida Realtors Florida Bar residential contract for sale and purchase between, and you put the seller's name here, and then you put your buyer's name here, and here you're going to put the full property description. Here you will need your initials from your buyer and your seller. So for the kickout clause, it says right here that the seller will have the right to continue to show the property and solicit and enter into a bona fide backup purchase contracts with third party that are subject to the termination of this primary contract. So that means that you would still be able to market the property on the MLS. You would still be able to show it. You would still be able to continue on just like as if you didn't have a contract at all. So then upon entering into this backup contract, the seller will give the buyer a copy of the backup contract with the third party's identification and purchase price information obliterated. That means that you have continued to market the property. You found a second buyer who's interested in the property and they give you a contract. And so what you would be entering into with your second buyer is a backup contract. So if you enter into a backup contract with the next person, the person you have the original contract with the kickout clause, will have a right to that bona fide backup contract. But you can redact the names of the parties and the amounts that are listed in the prices that are negotiated in that contract. So redact that out, show your buyer a full copy of the contract or backup contract, and then at that point your buyer has a decision to make. So if we read on here, to continue with this primary contract, the buyer must make an additional deposit of blank, and you decide what that is ahead of time. It could be $1, it could be 1,000, 10,000, whatever number you want. To the escrow agent within 3 days from receipt of the backup contract. By giving additional deposit to escrow agent within 3 days, the buyer waives all contingencies for financing and sale of buyer's property, and the parties will close on the closing date. The additional deposit will be credited to the buyer at closing. If buyer fails to timely make the additional deposit, then this primary contract shall terminate and the buyer shall be refunded the deposit, thereby releasing buyer and seller from all further obligations under this contract. So what that means is if the first buyer decides, they see that you've got a second bona fide contract, backup contract, and they don't want to lose that house. They're going to make that purchase. They're going to do whatever they can. They're going to take away all of their financing contingencies, so they can't say it is contingent on an appraisal anymore. They can't say it's contingent on selling their home. Basically, it turns into all of the terms of a cash sale. And if they have the ability and the desire to do that, what they have to do is put their deposit into escrow and move forward with the sale closing on the closing date. And if that happens, then buyer number 2 loses out. But they also have an opportunity to, at that point, if they're unable to do that or unwilling to do that, then they just don't make their deposit. 3 days later, they're allowed to get their initial deposit back from the escrow company, and then they just move on and find another house. And you, as the seller's agent, move on to your backup contract. It now becomes full first position, and you go along with the terms of your second contract. So in this way, nobody really loses. Well, I mean, I guess one of the buyers won't be able to buy the house. But everybody is aware of what's going on. They have the ability to make the decision whether it fits into their budget or their, you know, purchasing plans as to whether or not they can move forward with the sale, or they'll get their deposit back and they can go on and find another house.